Hey, it's James here from GoodGuitarist.com, and this is the third entry in my series on building good guitar habits. The whole point of this series is to find manageable, sustainable ways that we can improve on guitar without making huge changes to our lives. Because as I'm sure you know, anytime we make those huge resolutions, they don't usually turn out how we'd hoped, but including small, good habits is proven to work. If you want to get the whole picture and hear all the reasoning or psychology behind this, like I said, this is the third installment. You should check out the whole series if you haven't yet. There's a link down below for that. And while you're down there, if you could take a moment to subscribe to the channel, that way you can follow along with the entire series, which comes out every Saturday, as well as my usual lessons. There's also a free crash course, I almost forgot. You'll see a link down below for that as well. I teach all the basics and I'll help you learn a couple songs in just 2 weeks. It's completely free, so please check that out. Anyways, in our first installment, we talked about why this works and the idea of practicing for 10 minutes a day. In our second installment, we addressed the mechanics of strumming and how that can make anybody a better guitar player, no matter what style of music they're trying to learn. And today, our good habit is going to involve our chord hand and being efficient in our movement. Now, I'll start out by pointing out the problem or the reason why we would want to do this in the first place. I notice many students, when they come into me for lessons, it's really common to change chords like this. And that causes issues like not being able to accurately place your fingers on the correct spot, which in turn causes fret buzz, slow chord changes, which in turn causes you to fall behind in the song, and it actually messes up your strumming. Or maybe being really good with a handful of chords, but learning new chords is a massive struggle, and certain chords like the C chord are avoided. Maybe you feel like you'll never be able to do that C chord well, so you avoid songs that involve it. If any of those describe you, I have several solutions that I'd like to outline today. And it all begins with picking a single chord switch and committing to it and focusing on that one switch for the entire week. I have found the most success both in training myself to play guitar and in training others by removing variables. Last week when we were strumming, we removed the chord variable by muting the strings and focusing 100% on the rhythm and how all that feels. And learning chords is no different. Yes, the song you want to learn probably has 3 or 4 chords in it, but if you look at the number of combinations, G to C, G to D, C to D, G to E minor to C, E minor to D, and so on. Even with 4 chords, it's like 7 possible switches or something like that. But with 2 chords, it's just one switch. That's it. So we're going to stick to a single switch for the entire week, or at least a few practice sessions, because that'll allow us to focus on the many other aspects of chord switching that we wouldn't otherwise notice. For today's switch, I want to take a look at going between G and C, because that is an incredibly common switch, and there are a lot of issues associated with it. First, we're going to make a G chord, and we're going to make it the best we can. Pinky on the 3rd fret of the thinnest string, ring finger just above that, middle finger on the 3rd fret of the thickest string. Index can go on the 2nd fret, but if it's muted, it's not a huge deal. And then we're going to switch to C. Index on the 1st fret of the B string, middle finger on the 2nd fret of the D string, and then our ring finger on the 3rd fret of the A string. And you just make each of those chord shapes. You could even test each string, pick each string to see if it's all ringing clearly. If I'm doing it that way, I'm muting that string, so I make a little adjustment. And knowing where to put your fingers and testing it out like that is really just the first step out of like 20. And usually that's the only step people ever worry about. But I want to show you something here. When I play the G chord, I want you to pay attention to the palm of my hand. See how it's kind of on an angle compared to the fretboard? Whereas where I play the C chord, my palm is more parallel to the fretboard. So for the G chord, it's like that, and for the C chord, it's like that. And I want you to write this down because I'm going to give you a list of things to focus on. The first thing is hand angle. And you're going to practice switching from G to C. And I'm going to show you what to do. You can practice after the video. You're going to switch like 10 to 20 times, which takes 1 or 2 minutes, and you focus on your hand angle the entire time. And see how that affects the switch. You know, when you focus on angling your hand a bit differently, does your elbow move in? You know, does it like move in for C and out for G? What is your thumb doing? You know, is it in a good spot? Does it have to change angle a little bit? And ultimately, it gives us something to focus on other than putting your fingers in the right spots. It keeps your chord switching practice session fresh, which helps us get more time into it without getting frustrated. And the variables that I'm going to give you, hand angle is the first one. You can do these in pretty much any order. The next one that I want to cover is focusing on where your fingers are on the frets. Are they close enough to the fret? Because as you may know, when your finger is right beside the fret, you get the maximum leverage. You know, it takes the least force to press it. You get the clearest note. But when you get further from the fret, it requires more force. You kind of start bending the note a little bit. It has a tendency to buzz more easily. So as we're changing chords, we want to see if our fingers can get as close to the frets as possible. When we're pressing a single note, we can always get right up to the fret. But when we're playing chord shapes, like the A chord for instance, we can't squeeze them all up to the fret. We do have to compromise. You know, like I can't really get that to happen without my fingers getting all weird, right? So when we're playing G, our pinky can be right up to the fret. And that's good because our pinky is a little bit weaker. Giving it more leverage is going to be great. Our ring finger is just a tiny bit further away, you know, because our pinky's in the way. Our middle finger has to be in line with our ring finger because in order to twist it up that way, my hand has to go through the fretboard. So that's not going to happen, right? It's lining up right with my ring finger. And then our index can go right up to the fret and, you know, it's not a huge deal if that's muted. And we switch from G to C, and we're not paying attention to hand angle anymore. We did that during yesterday's practice session or the last couple days. You know, now we're just focusing on finger placement. We try to get all our fingers as close to the fret as possible. We make our switch do the same thing. You know, we're working on a different aspect of it. And the next variable that I'd like to cover is our thumb position and how that affects our fingers' reach. You know, if you put your thumb higher, your fingers have way less length and leverage. Like I can hardly reach my fingers, right? If your thumb's lower, you get more reach, right? As you improve on guitar, you can put your thumb higher. It does have certain advantages, especially if you're going between leads and rhythm. But before you can do that, you need to be able to control where your thumb is and have a ton of strength there. You know, that's what we're trying to gain. We're not trying to get good at having a low thumb or good at having a high thumb. We want to reach the point where our thumb goes where it needs to go automatically, depending on what we're doing. And it all starts with our thumb a little bit lower. You know, my thumb's kind of there, right? It's not high up, it's not too low, it's around the middle. This puts my knuckles forward, makes my fingers feel longer. We get more reach. And this also helps our fingers stay curved or arched. You know, and this is especially important on the C chord because on the C chord, if I put my thumb higher, half the strings get muted. It's called the thenar eminence. That's the muscle between your thumb and your index. And that's doing a lot of work to, you know, squeeze those notes, right? And we want to develop strength and control there, have our thumb a bit lower. We can curl our fingers. Our chords will be clearer. So that's the next thing we focus on. Once again, you switch like 20 times a day, you know, or for a couple minutes, and you do it for a few days till you're really comfortable with it. Now, the next thing that I want you to focus on is the entire support system, your shoulder, your posture, you know, all that kind of stuff. You just got to ask yourself as you're switching chords, like, is your shoulder helping pull back a little bit? Is it like loose and relaxed, or is it all like cinched and sagging and making your back hurt? You know, when you're playing chords, your shoulder kind of pulls your hand back and helps apply pressure to the front of the guitar, which takes some of the weight off of your fingers. Really quick, I'm no physiologist or physiotherapist or whatever, but just looking at how your arm connects, you know, your shoulder supports like your upper arm, which supports your forearm, which supports your wrist, your palm, and that supports your fingers. So you kind of just want to go through each of those pieces. I like to start with sitting up straight with like my spine And as I'm switching chords, I consider, am I sitting up straight? As I switch chords, can I still keep sitting up straight, or does it mess things up? Is my shoulder dipping when I do this, or can I keep it up as I switch chords? Maybe you got to put the guitar up a little bit, tip the neck up. How's my bicep or my forearm doing? My elbow, is it coming in? And you just kind of go through your little checklist, just thinking about your body from here all the way to here. And now, finally, the last one. This is the granddaddy of them all. Once you've spent a few practice sessions focusing on each of those other variables, the goal is to make your finger movement 100% efficient. And that means lifting your fingers as little as possible to get them to the next spot. And this is one of those technical refinements that you don't need to do. But when somebody does it, it's the difference between a decent guitar player and an exceptional one. When you watch somebody and it looks effortless, this is what makes it look effortless. This is how you get there. So you have your G chord, and instead of lifting your fingers all the way up and then placing them down one at a time in this kind of inefficient way, which you do have to do it first. Keep in mind, I don't want you to just jump right away to doing this. I want you to be where you're at. Do all those other things first. This is like the finishing touch, where you slowly move your fingers and you just try to figure out the most efficient path for every finger. You're in slow motion here. So for instance, if I'm on the G chord, my ring finger is on the B string, but has to come up to the A string. So I can move in like a straight line there with barely lifting it off the fretboard. Just get it up there. My middle finger and index can kind of pivot out to the C chord. I can kind of move those fingers together, right? And eventually I can get it to look pretty smooth. And I wouldn't really do this until you can already cleanly switch from G to C in the context of a song. So if you can use G to C in songs, this is the kind of thing that you want to do to make yourself a little bit better. And this might be way down the road, but I figured I'd just show you this because it is sort of like the end goal, to be mindful and make your hands look and feel as perfect as they can be. Either way, that's it. I want you to write down those 5 variables: hand angle, finger close to fret, thumb, support system, and efficiency. You could focus on one of those a day, like hand angle on Monday, finger close to the fret on Tuesday, and so on. Or you could do it like once a week, every 3 days. Totally up to you. Don't forget to check out my crash course where we learn a couple of songs and all the fundamental techniques. It's 100% free on my website. There's a link down below for that. I also have a full start to finish course with over 100 video lessons called Learn Guitar Once and For All. And if you just want to cut to the chase and get that total package that'll take you from absolute beginner or somebody who has always struggled with chords and strumming and become somebody who can just show up to the party and strum some tunes, this will make that happen. There's a link down below for that too. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel. As always, I appreciate your support. Have a fun time practicing, and I'll see you soon.